Have you ever had a dream so vivid it felt like someone was trying to tell you something? Imagine if every dream held secret messages, hidden clues about your future, your fears, or your destiny. Well, thousands of years ago, the ancient Egyptians didn't just believe in dreams, they mastered the art of interpreting them. Dreams guided their decisions, shaped their kingdoms, and even determined the fate of powerful pharaohs. But how exactly did Egyptians decode these nightly visions? Were their dreams truly divine messages, or just the mind playing tricks? In the next few minutes, we'll uncover fascinating secrets from ancient Egyptian dream manuals, temples built just for dreaming, and symbolic meanings that could unlock hidden truths in your own dreams. So stay with me, because by the end, you might never look at dreams the same way again. Have you ever awakened from a dream so vivid and meaningful that you couldn't just shake the feeling it was trying to tell you something? Well, you're not alone. Thousands of years ago, along the fertile banks of the Nile, records discovered on ancient papyrus scrolls reveal detailed dream interpretations, rituals, and instructions on how to understand these nightly visions. Egyptian rulers frequently turned to dreams to make crucial decisions about warfare, alliances, and internal governance. In one famous historical account, the Egyptians carefully distinguished between ordinary dreams and divine visions. Known as dream temples or incubation chambers, reinforce the significance of dreams. People would travel great distances to sleep in these sacred spaces, hoping to receive clear messages from the gods during their rest. Before sleeping, they performed rituals to purify themselves and demonstrate respect for the divine presence. These practices highlighted their belief that dreams could genuinely influence health, wealth, happiness, and even survival. Divine dreams typically contained vivid imagery, clarity, and a powerful emotional resonance that lingered long after waking. The Egyptians believed these dreams were the clearest signs that gods were directly involved, providing crucial insights that could alter destinies. Pharaoh Thutmose IV dreamt of the great Sphinx promising him kingship if he cleared away the sand covering its body. Taking this dream as a divine message, Thutmose immediately ordered the sands cleared, and soon after ascended to the throne, crediting his rule to the prophetic power of that single dream. A particularly famous example is the Dream Book Papyrus, a manual from around 1279 to 1213 BCE. During the reign of Ramesses II, this document offers an astonishing look into the sophisticated system Egyptians used to interpret dreams. For instance, it describes scenarios such as dreaming of seeing oneself dead, which intriguingly indicated a long life ahead, or encountering snakes, which symbolized protection rather than danger. The ancient Egyptians were fascinated by the idea that dreams were not mere fantasies of the sleeping mind, but powerful, direct messages from the gods themselves. To the Egyptians, dreams were sacred channels of communication, bridges between humanity and the divine. They believed that when they closed their eyes each night, they didn't just drift into rest. They served as dream specialists who could decode complex symbols, providing guidance and reassurance to individuals and entire communities. When people faced important life decisions, uncertainties, or fears, they often sought the wisdom found in dreams. Priests would help clarify whether these dreams were warnings, guidance, or affirmations from specific gods. For example, if someone dreamed of abundant crops, priests might attribute the vision as a blessing from Osiris, the god of fertility and rebirth. Dreams about warfare or protection were often associated with Horus, the powerful falcon-headed god, symbolizing strength and divine favor. They journeyed into a realm where gods could speak to them clearly, away from the distractions of the waking world. It was a nightly journey, one that every Egyptian, from commoners to the pharaoh himself, deeply respected and eagerly anticipated. Dreams were so important that Egyptians documented them meticulously. Priests played a vital role as interpreters of these divine messages. But it wasn't just ordinary people who depended on dreams. Pharaohs also heavily relied on them. Dreams were also thought to reveal hidden truths or future events, guiding people through life's uncertainties. Temples dedicated to dreaming. Close your eyes and picture yourself waking up in ancient Egypt. The sun is just beginning to warm the golden sands outside. A village once home to the workers who built the tombs of kings and queens. For example, if a man sees himself drinking beer, the papyrus of dreams was found among the remains of a village of artisans, not nobles. Or scholars suggesting that the power of dreams was something ordinary Egyptians valued too. In a world where so much was mysterious and out of one's control, being able to read the signs sent through dreams gave people comfort, clarity, and sometimes even hope. The book says, it means good fortune. Tools a way to hear the whispers of the gods and understand the hidden forces shaping one's life. And even now, thousands of years later, we're still trying to do the same, to make sense of the strange, beautiful messages that visit us in the night. Others were more ominous, like if a man sees himself falling from a high place, which was interpreted as a warning of danger ahead. And some were oddly poetic dreams of flying, of rivers flooding, or animals speaking were all rich with symbolic meaning. One entry even describes eating crocodile flesh and says it means the dreamer will gain power over his enemies. These weren't just guesses, they were deeply rooted in the Egyptian worldview, shaped by their gods, their beliefs about the soul, and their intimate connection with the natural world. This ancient manuscript is over 3,000 years old. Left the body during sleep and journeyed through the spiritual realm. While there, it could encounter gods, receive omens, or face challenges that reflected back into the waking world. The dreams were the soul's report from that journey, and interpreting them and understanding your place in the universe. This is why dream interpretation was a serious matter, often overseen by trained priests who had studied the symbols and knew how to decode their meanings. Written during the reign of Ramesses II, it's considered the oldest surviving dream interpretation manual in the world. But it wasn't a mythical scroll locked away in a temple. This was a practical guide, a kind of dream dictionary used by priests, scribes, and possibly even everyday Egyptians who wanted to understand the messages hidden in their sleep. Written in a flowing hieratic script, it contained more than 100 dream scenarios, each beginning with a phrase like, if a man sees himself, followed by a specific dream image, and then its interpretation. And the stone walls of your home still feel cool from the night, but in your mind, something lingers a dream. In our modern world, you might ignore it, but in ancient Egypt, that dream would have been taken seriously. It could be a divine message, a hidden warning, or a glimpse into your future. And if you wanted to understand it, you would turn to one of the most fascinating documents in history, the Papyrus of Dreams, also known as the Ramesside Dream Book. Discovered in Deir al-Medina, some of the entries feel timeless. The Egyptians believed that part of the soul, called the Ka, but what's truly fascinating is that this knowledge wasn't just for royalty or priests. The Papyrus of Dreams shows us that dreams were never just dreams in ancient Egypt. They were powerful, prophetic. In ancient Egypt, dreams weren't simply nighttime hallucinations or the mind's random wanderings. They were sacred. They were thought to be divine messages delivered in symbols and signs, carefully woven into the subconscious by the gods themselves. To an Egyptian, every dream was a puzzle, a coded message waiting to be unlocked. The Nile was more than a river, it was Egypt's very heartbeat. It gave life, it created seasons, it dictated survival. They were mystical gateways to higher consciousness. Highly respected in daily life, cats were believed to possess protective, almost magical qualities. In dreams, they acted as spiritual guardians. Falcons were seen as messengers of Horus, the sky god, and symbolized divine vision and guidance. Dreaming of a falcon flying high above was believed to represent a call to clarity, a push from the divine to rise above worldly distractions and see the bigger picture. Dreams received on certain days of the month, especially under the full moon, were believed to carry extra significance. Certain temples had dream chambers where people would sleep in hopes of receiving a divine message. These chambers were considered sacred portals between this world and the next, and symbols seen in dreams during temple sleep were treated as oracles. If someone dreamt of a pyramid while sleeping in the temple of Osiris, for example, that dream could change the course of their life. Ibises linked to the god Thoth were seen as symbols of wisdom and communication. Even in modern dream psychology, snakes are often linked to transformation. Water reflects emotional states, pyramids represent ambition or spiritual growth, and cats continue to be associated with independence and intuition. This ancient system of symbols continues to live within us, perhaps because it speaks to something deeper, something universal about the human condition. The Egyptians weren't just interpreting dreams, they were mapping the soul. Every symbol was like a hieroglyph of the subconscious, and reading it brought the dreamer closer to their divine self. If someone dreamt of an ibis walking calmly beside them or speaking in a human voice, it was interpreted as a sign that sacred knowledge was being revealed. Cats, buildings. Are you flying or falling? Surrounded by birds or walking through sand? Each of these carries a message, perhaps not just from your own mind, but from something older and wiser, a whisper passed down from a civilization that believed the gods spoke in dreams. And who knows? Maybe they still do. Doves meant peace. Owls, though rare, hinted at hidden knowledge or spiritual mysteries yet to be uncovered. Birds flying in flocks often represented community, shared goals, or social transformation, while a bird trapped in a cage warned of restriction or silenced truth. A calm, purring cat resting beside the dreamer often meant divine favor. It indicated intuition, emotional clarity, and peace within the household. Bread, for instance, symbolized sustenance and divine generosity. Dreaming of eating fresh bread meant stability and abundance, while stale or moldy bread could signal scarcity or missed opportunities. Sandals were another common image symbolizing travel, movement, or transition. If the dreamer lost their sandals, it meant they were unprepared for a journey ahead. Finding sandals might mean a new opportunity or phase in life. Boats were deeply spiritual symbols as well, especially since Egyptians believed that the soul traveled across the waters of the afterlife. Dreaming of a boat often meant the dreamer was undergoing a personal transformation. A calm boat ride represented smooth change, while a capsizing boat warned of emotional turmoil or spiritual resistance. Shadows, oddly enough, also appeared in dreams, and these were taken very seriously. A shadow with no visible source was thought to represent an ancestor or perhaps a spiritual guide. But dark, moving shadows were seen as signs of deception or unresolved trauma. The goddess Bastet was closely linked to cats, and her presence in dreams was interpreted as a sign of nurturing, safety, and even fertility. In temples and schools, specially trained priests served as professional dream interpreters. These men, and sometimes women, had memorized hundreds of symbolic meanings and were trained to consider timing, lunar phases, and even the emotional tone of the dreamer. Dreams weren't interpreted in isolation. They were examined within a person's full spiritual and life context. If someone dreamt of a snake in the temple and they were a priest, that dream meant something entirely different than if the same dream was had by a fisherman. Status, setting, emotional response, and symbols all intertwined to reveal the full meaning. But like all symbols, context changed everything. If the cat in the dream was aggressive, hissing, or hiding in shadows, it was a warning. It might mean betrayal from someone close, perhaps a friend or a family member. It could also represent internal fears, something the dreamer was refusing to confront. These dreams weren't dismissed lightly. People acted on them, adjusted relationships, and sometimes even performed rituals to cleanse their homes of negative energies. Dreaming of a pyramid rising high, standing strong under the stars, was considered a sacred sign. It represented spiritual elevation, connection to the gods, and an awakening of purpose. Some believed it meant the dreamer's soul was calling them to a higher path, maybe even a life of service or leadership. Dreaming of building a pyramid could be seen as creating one's legacy or aligning oneself with cosmic order. However, not all pyramid dreams were positive. A leaning or crumbling pyramid was a deeply ominous sign. It could mean a loss of honor, the collapse of one's beliefs, or spiritual disconnection. Dreaming of a pyramid engulfed in sand suggested forgotten truths or abandonment of one's divine path. People who had these dreams often sought immediate counsel from temple priests, hoping to correct their course before spiritual damage became real. So when it appeared in dreams, it wasn't ignored, it was studied with reverence. A calm and steady Nile, with clear water gently flowing, was a symbol of divine blessing. It meant harmony, abundance, and inner peace. For farmers and artisans, such a dream could signify an upcoming good harvest or successful season. For the spiritual elite, it might mean emotional balance and alignment with the divine will. But the Nile had another face too. If the river in the dream was flooding, overflowing, or roaring with violent currents, it became a sign of danger or upheaval. It could mean conflict was brewing, either within the dreamer or in their external world. In some cases, it warned of political chaos, loss of property, or social collapse. Again, the context mattered. Was the dreamer struggling in the water? Was their home being washed away? Or were they watching safely from the banks? Egyptians believed these dreams were more than symbols. They were forecasts of real-life events. And at the center of these messages were symbols, powerful, mystical elements drawn from everyday life, religion, and nature. These were not just cultural decorations. They were tools, signs from the divine realm. They shaped decisions, directed emotions, and in many cases, determined how a person would live or even survive. The Egyptians knew that the spiritual and physical worlds were connected, and nowhere was that link more alive than in dreams. One of the most frequently appearing and heavily weighted symbols in Egyptian dreams was the snake. Serpents were not simply feared creatures crawling through the desert sand. They were sacred, deeply tied to the divine and the subconscious. In real life, snakes represented both danger and power, but in dreams, they carried an even deeper duality. A calm, coiled snake appearing in one's dream might represent divine protection. It could symbolize inner transformation or spiritual awakening, an echo of the snake's natural ability to shed its skin and be reborn. This was particularly true when the dreamer saw the snake in a peaceful place, like a temple garden or beneath the moonlight. On the other hand, if the snake was aggressive, biting, or hissing, the symbolism shifted dramatically. It was seen as a warning, an indication of betrayal, illness, or internal unrest. The priests and dream interpreters of Egypt paid close attention, not just to the symbol itself, but to how it appeared, where it appeared, and how the dreamer reacted to it. These details shaped the entire meaning of the dream. Another powerful dream symbol in Egypt was the Nile River. Then there were pyramids, perhaps the most iconic symbols of Egyptian civilization. But in dreams, pyramids weren't just monuments to the dead. Cats also featured heavily in Egyptian dream lore. Birds, too, appeared often in dreams. Even the simplest objects in Egyptian life were rich with symbolic meaning when seen in dreams. Interpreting these dreams wasn't a task for amateurs. Interestingly, Egyptians also believed that the timing of the dream mattered. What's remarkable is that many of these symbols still resonate today. So the next time you close your eyes and drift into sleep, Think about the symbols you see. Are there snakes? Rivers? One of the most famous dream temples was at Serapeum, the sanctuary of the god Serapis. Here, both Egyptians and later Greeks would come to receive divine wisdom through sleep. Historical records speak of visitors who entered with ailments, both physical and emotional, and awoke with either complete healing or instructions on what to do next. In some cases, the god himself would appear in the dream and speak clearly. Or the rituals, they were built on a deep cultural trust in the power of silence and sleep. The Egyptians understood something that modern science is only beginning to confirm, that sleep is not a shutdown, but a portal. The concept of a dream temple might feel distant or even mystical, but the wisdom behind it remains timeless. What if we allowed ourselves sacred sleep? What if we treated our dreams not as leftovers of the day, but as messages from a deeper self or even something divine? Travelers and seekers still visit, hoping to feel the energy of those who once laid on stone beds, whispering their fears to the stars and waking with answers. The world may have changed, but the need for meaning, healing, and spiritual connection has not. The dream temples may be silent, but the dreams are still speaking. The Egyptians remind us that true rest is not just physical. And if you listen closely in that quiet space between wakefulness and rest, you might just hear the ancient voice of Egypt whisper back, "Sleep peacefully, dream deeply, and remember the gods may still be listening. It's spiritual, it's intentional." And when we make space for sacred sleep, we invite insight, healing, and even transformation. During sleep, the mind lets go of conscious logic and opens itself to intuition, symbolism, and spiritual presence. The Egyptians didn't have EEGs or sleep labs, but they understood the value of sleep with reverence. They knew that if you created the right environment, calm, sacred, focused, you could unlock something greater than yourself. In others, the dream would be cryptic, filled with symbols that needed decoding. But either way, these dreams were rarely dismissed. These records were treated like scripture, guiding communities for generations. Some included precise instructions. On the fifth night, the god Thoth came to me and placed a feather on my chest. I awoke knowing I must forgive my brother. But for the Egyptians, they were simply a natural extension of life's spiritual journey. You didn't just live by the sun. You were guided by the moon. You didn't just work with your hands. You listened with your spirit. And you didn't just sleep, you dreamed with purpose. Others were poetic. I walked among the stars, and the goddess Nut opened the sky like a book. She showed me my name written in the heavens. Whether personal or collective, these dreams shaped behavior, law, and even architecture. Some temples were expanded or redesigned based on dreams. Some healing practices were created entirely from divine dreams. They were treated as sacred encounters, a moment when the divine took notice of a human life. There were also dream chambers within the temples of Imhotep, the deified architect and physician. People came from far regions to sleep in these spaces. Many people came seeking prophecy. They wanted answers about their lives, their families, their fates. Should they take a certain journey, marry a certain person, make an offering to a specific god? The dream would decide. And often, these dreams held unexpected clarity. A traveler might dream of walking a dangerous mountain path and being struck by a falling rock, only to avoid that exact fate by changing his route. A merchant might see himself pouring gold into a river and interpret that as a warning against reckless investment. Even kings consulted dream temples. It's said that pharaohs would sometimes isolate themselves in sacred sleep chambers before major decisions, wars, alliances, or spiritual reforms, hoping to be cured of illnesses that traditional methods couldn't touch. Imhotep's temple was not just a hospital, it was a spiritual healing center, where dreams offered insight into the cause and cure of ailments. Patients were often given herbal preparations or instructions before sleep, and after dreaming, their healing plan would be adjusted based on what the gods revealed. Imagine being told in a dream which herb to use for your stomach pain, or which ritual to perform to cleanse your spirit. For the Egyptians, this wasn't magical thinking, it was deeply practical, rooted in their understanding of how the physical and spiritual worlds intertwined. Dream temples weren't only for healing. These temples weren't just about the architecture. Many of the dream reports recorded by priests were preserved on papyri or temple walls. Today, as we rush through life, constantly connected to noise, light, and distraction, some modern researchers have started referring to Egyptian dream temples as the earliest form of therapeutic space, a fusion of psychology, spirituality, and community healing. Even now, temples like those of Serapis and Imhotep stand in ruins, but their echoes remain. So tonight, as you prepare for sleep, ask yourself, what question are you holding? What guidance are you seeking? Special temples dedicated to dream incubation and prophetic visions. In the heart of ancient Egypt, where golden sand met the slow, eternal pulse of the Nile, there existed a rare kind of sacred space, one not built for worship in the usual sense, but for a much quieter, more intimate conversation with the divine. They were considered genuine interactions with the spirit world. And because of that belief, they crafted physical places where the line between sleep and the divine could blur. A dilemma to solve or a healing to request. This wasn't idle dreaming. The person had a purpose. Their mind was focused, their body still, and their spirit open. And while they slept, it was believed thereby the soul would rise, travel the spiritual world, and return with a dream, a message, a vision, a revelation. These dreams were then taken to dream interpreters, often priests or priestesses trained to read the symbolic language of the gods. They would listen to the dream, identify its symbols, and offer guidance or warnings. The interpretations were considered sacred knowledge, sometimes written down, sometimes used in court, and often shared with entire communities. These dream temples, sometimes attached to larger temples or healing sanctuaries, were constructed with sacred geometry, aligned with celestial patterns, and spiritually cleansed with ritual before being used. Their walls were often carved with prayers or protective spells. Their inner sanctums were cool, dark, and silent. Here, people would lie down on specially prepared beds or mats, wrapped in linen, sometimes perfumed with sacred oils, and prepared to dream. These were the dream temples. Unlike the grand stone monuments where chants echoed and incense burned in honor of gods, dream temples were peaceful sanctuaries designed for one purpose: to sleep, dream, and receive messages from the gods. They weren't loud. They weren't crowded. They were deeply spiritual, profoundly quiet, and built for those brave enough to close their eyes and step into the unknown. For the ancient Egyptians, dreams were not distractions of the mind. The practice was known as incubation, a deliberate attempt to receive a prophetic or healing dream. Incubation wasn't casual. It was treated as a ceremony. Before even entering the sleep chamber, participants had to prepare. They would often undergo days of purification, bathing in sacred water, avoiding certain foods, refraining from intimacy, and sometimes fasting. Some would chant specific hymns or offer gifts to the gods, especially to deities like Serapis, Imhotep, Thoth, or Isis, who were associated with dreams, wisdom, and healing. Only once a person was spiritually clean could they be allowed to sleep in the temple. Once inside, the sleeper would lie down with a specific intention, a question to ask the gods. Pharaohs didn't only dream of gods. Sometimes they dreamed of enemies, war, or omens of death. These dreams were considered deeply serious, almost like alerts from the divine realm. If a pharaoh dreamed of being chased, bitten, or defeated in battle, The priests would interpret it as a sign to prepare for confrontation or spiritual purification. Defensive walls were reinforced, rituals were performed, and military advisors were called. Their dream-inspired acts were praised in hymns, carved into obelisks, and celebrated in public ceremonies. Pharaohs didn't separate their inner world from the outer one. In their culture, the divine realm was not some distant heaven, but a present reality accessible, visible, and active, especially in dreams. Not because we believe the same things necessarily. Think of Thutmose asleep beneath the gaze of the Sphinx. Think of Amenhotep seeking balance. Think of Ramesses preparing for war after a warning from the gods. And remember, in ancient Egypt, dreams didn't just reflect reality. They shaped it. But because they show us a culture where intuition, spirituality, and leadership were connected in a way we often forget. The pharaoh wasn't just a ruler, he was a dreamer. He was expected to listen, to be open, to receive wisdom from beyond himself. And perhaps that's the lesson we can take too, that true leadership of a nation, a life, or even just the self requires more than control. It requires listening even in the silence of sleep, reinforcing the idea that listening to dreams was a hallmark of wisdom. Dreams were not ignored. Claiming that a god appeared in a dream and instructed them to act gave their decisions spiritual legitimacy. This was especially useful in moments of controversy, like moving the capital, introducing a new god, or changing religious rituals. Pharaoh Akhenaten, for example, introduced a revolutionary form of monotheism focused on the sun disk. Aten, though his reforms were radical, some scholars believe he justified them in part through divine visions and dreams, using personal experience as spiritual authority. They were used as early warning systems. One particularly eerie story involves Ramesses II, perhaps Egypt's most celebrated warrior king. On the eve of the famous Battle of Kadesh, Ramesses reportedly had a dream in which the god Set appeared known both as a protector and a bringer of chaos. In the dream, Set warned him of betrayal, though the meaning was unclear. Ramesses proceeded with caution, and though the battle was brutal and nearly disastrous, he survived and later used it as propaganda for his divine strength. Historians debate whether the dream truly occurred, but in Egyptian records, the story is clear: the gods were always watching and speaking through dreams. Pharaohs also dreamed of death and the afterlife, and these dreams were viewed as rehearsals for the soul's journey. Dreams of flying, walking through tombs, or meeting ancestors were interpreted as signs of divine favor or warnings to complete certain rituals. Some pharaohs altered their burial plans after receiving such dreams. A tomb might be moved, a pyramid reoriented, or specific spells added to the Book of the Dead scrolls buried with them. These dreams weren't dismissed as superstition. They were treated as instructions, as real and urgent as anything a priest or advisor might say in waking life. It wasn't just the dreams themselves, but how pharaohs responded that mattered. Great rulers were expected not only to command armies or pass laws, but to listen to the gods, even in sleep. A pharaoh who ignored a dream and suffered a downfall would be remembered as a cautionary tale. One late-period inscription speaks of a ruler who dismissed a dream warning of rebellion in the south. Weeks later, conflict erupted, and the kingdom lost control of valuable trade routes. His name was nearly erased from monuments, a punishment worse than death in Egyptian culture. On the other hand, those who obeyed dreams were often elevated in memory. Some pharaohs even used their dreams as a political tool. What we see through all of this is a deep and powerful integration of dream and duty. Even today, when we look at the ancient texts and monuments that preserve these dreams, we feel their weight. So the next time you find yourself dreaming, think of the pharaohs. Famous dreams of pharaohs that shaped Egypt's destiny. In the grand courts of ancient Egypt, where golden thrones shimmered in torchlight and the air was thick with incense, pharaohs didn't dream the way common folk did. Their dreams were treated as oracles. Another pharaoh, Amenhotep III, known for ushering in one of Egypt's most prosperous eras, also credited his dreams for guiding state decisions. He was known to dream of gods giving him instructions on how to maintain Mount, the cosmic balance that held Egypt together. One record details how he dreamed of the god Amun-Re, instructing him to build a series of temples and offer specific rituals to prevent future droughts. He obeyed, and his reign became a golden age of construction and spiritual renewal. And entire priestly orders were dedicated to understanding their meanings. The priests of Thoth, Horus, and Ra all took part in dream analysis, especially when the dreams involved visions of the sun, stars, animals, or divine symbols. These dreams were so influential that many became immortalized on temple walls. Stele and papyrus scrolls etched into the historical and spiritual fabric of Egypt. Dreams were not just personal experiences, they were affairs of state. Before he became pharaoh, Thutmose was a prince with little chance of ascending the throne. One day, while resting in the shade of the Great Sphinx near Giza, he fell asleep and had a powerful dream. In it, the Sphinx considered the embodiment of the sun god Rahorti spoke to him. The god promised that if Thutmose cleared the sand burying the Sphinx's body, he would become the next pharaoh. When Thutmose awoke, he immediately ordered the clearing of the Sphinx, and soon after, ascended to the throne just as the dream had foretold. To honor the vision, he commissioned the dream stele, a stone slab placed between the Sphinx's paws. Describing the dream in detail, that dream didn't just change Thutmose's life, it changed the political landscape of Egypt. For a pharaoh, a dream could be more powerful than a royal decree. It could change military plans, inspire new temples, or even alter Egypt's future. Unlike ordinary people, pharaohs were believed to be living God's divine beings on earth, chosen not just by lineage, but by the will of the gods themselves. So when a pharaoh dreamed, it wasn't taken lightly. It was recorded, studied, and in some cases revered for generations. Dreams were believed to be channels of divine communication, and for a ruler, they were often interpreted as prophecies. One of the most iconic examples of a pharaoh's dream-shaping history is the story of Thutmose IV. This was not an isolated case. Snakes, too, held strong meaning in dream interpretation, as we discussed earlier in the series. But what's fascinating is how specific the Egyptians were with their dream symbols. They didn't just dream of a bird or a snake. They dreamt of certain kinds of birds, snakes in particular settings, animals behaving in specific ways. A dream of being bitten by a cobra might mean that you are in conflict with authority or ignoring a divine warning. Dreaming of a dog following you might mean protection or the presence of a guiding ancestor. Dreaming of taming a lion was seen as a dream of conquest, personal or political. Being chased by a lion, however, meant the dreamer was being overpowered by emotion or pressure. Were they friendly? Silent? Were they watching the dreamer or ignoring them? Each detail changed the interpretation. A peaceful animal meant harmony. An aggressive animal meant conflict. But the most important sign was how the dream made the dreamer feel. Egyptian dream interpreters often said, "The heart never lies in sleep." If you woke from the dream feeling fear, it meant a warning. If you woke with peace, it meant a blessing had been delivered. Priests would often ask the dreamer if they were ignoring a responsibility or trying to escape a divine calling. The animals in these dreams were not just symbols, they were teachers. Or a crocodile, remember, in the world of ancient Egypt, you're not just dreaming. You're receiving a message. A sacred, symbolic vision meant not just to entertain, but to guide, protect, and transform. Let your dreams speak. and let the animals lead the way. They reflected the health of one's soul, the balance of one's life, and the whispers of the gods. Egyptians believed that the divine spoke through the forms most familiar to us. And what could be more familiar, more present in everyday life than the creatures we live beside? An aggressive dog, on the other hand, symbolized betrayal or threats to one's safety, especially from familiar people. If someone dreamed of a bird perched on a crocodile, it suggested conflicting forces, perhaps an emotional battle between trust and control. A cat sitting beside a jackal could symbolize the union of protection and transformation, possibly signaling a coming loss that would eventually lead to growth. A dream of flying with birds could suggest that your soul is ready for spiritual ascension or release. Let's not forget the jackal, associated with Anubis, the god of death and mummification. Dreaming of a jackal, especially one walking beside you, was seen as a sign of transition. Not necessarily death, but change. Dreaming of a horse running free was interpreted as a desire for liberation or the arrival of swift change. The goddess Hathor, often depicted with cow horns, represented joy, motherhood, and music. Dreaming of cattle grazing peacefully was a beautiful sign. It meant emotional or material abundance. But diseased or dead cattle in dreams were warnings of famine, sadness, or spiritual blockages. A tamed horse symbolized control, discipline, or the successful mastery of one's instincts. The kind of deep, transformative change that reshapes a person's path. It might mean a career shift, the end of a relationship, or a spiritual awakening. People who dreamt of jackals were often told to pay attention to signs around them. They were advised to remain humble and observant, because something important was ending and something equally important was beginning. Horses were less commonly seen in earlier periods of Egyptian history, but became more relevant in later dynasties. Cattle, oxen, bulls, and cows were associated with abundance, fertility, and nourishment. Dogs, loyal companions, even in ancient Egypt, were considered guardians of both the physical and spiritual world. Lions, associated with strength, and the goddess Sekhmet were symbols of raw power. Interpreters also looked at combinations of animals in dreams. Dreamers were also encouraged to note how the animals behaved. Ultimately, animal dreams in ancient Egypt served one grand purpose. They connected humans with the natural and divine order. So tonight, when you dream, if you find yourself face to face with a cat, a bird, a jackal, animals in dreams, what did they mean? Interpretations involving cats, crocodiles, birds, and other sacred animals. In ancient Egypt, animals were never seen as ordinary creatures. They were sacred, symbolic, and deeply spiritual. The way it behaved and the context in which it emerged. These dreams were thought to be encoded in a symbolic language. The Nile crocodile, feared and respected in equal measure, was associated with the powerful god Sobek, a deity of strength, fertility, and military power. To dream of a crocodile was a serious matter. If the crocodile in the dream was calm, swimming peacefully, or sunbathing near water, it could signify personal power, confidence, or a warning to prepare for challenges ahead with courage. A crocodile resting near your feet in a dream might mean that you are gaining silent power, about to enter a phase of influence or leadership. But a crocodile attacking or chasing the dreamer was deeply alarming. It was seen as a clear warning, betrayal, danger, or even physical illness. Some interpreted these dreams as messages from Sobek himself, either offering his strength or demanding respect. In some rare cases, people who dreamt of crocodiles were instructed to make offerings to Sobek or cleanse themselves spiritually to avoid misfortune. And animals were some of the most important symbols of all. The falcon, for instance, was directly linked to Horus, the god of the sky, kingship, and protection. Dreaming of a falcon flying above was considered a blessing. It suggested that the dreamer was being watched over, guided, or even elevated spiritually. A falcon landing on one's shoulder in a dream might mean divine favor or coming rise in status. Birds in general represented freedom, spiritual messages, and connection to the heavens. The ibis, another sacred bird, was the symbol of Thoth, god of wisdom and writing. Dreaming of an ibis meant knowledge was coming, perhaps a new insight, an answer to a long-standing question, or even a message from a divine or ancestral source. People who had such dreams were sometimes encouraged to write more, meditate, or seek truth through study. Interpreting an animal dream wasn't just a matter of logic, it was an act of spiritual translation. Associated with Mut, a mother goddess and protector, vultures in dreams often symbolize protection, maternal care, and the presence of divine guardianship, especially for women. To see a vulture circling above could mean that spiritual forces were surrounding and watching over the dreamer. However, as with all symbols, context was everything. If the vulture was scavenging or appeared near death in a dream, it could signal that something in the dreamer's life was being neglected or was spiritually unclean. A way to read the voice of the divine hidden in the quiet language of sleep. The Egyptian world was one of deep respect for nature, where cats roamed temple courtyards as divine guardians. Crocodiles lurked in the Nile as manifestations of gods. In waking life, cats were revered, protected by law, and often associated with the goddess Bastet, the fierce, loving guardian of home and family. In dreams, cats carried similarly powerful messages. A calm, purring cat in a dream was almost always a sign of protection. It meant that the dreamer was safe, watched over by spiritual forces, often female deities, or ancestors acting in the background. Dreaming of a cat resting in the sunlight might symbolize peace, balance, and inner harmony. Some believed it meant that the gods were pleased, and your household was in divine alignment. But if a cat appeared agitated, hissing, or aggressive in a dream, the meaning changed drastically. An angry or wild cat was a warning sign. It suggested hidden enemies, betrayal from someone close, or a spiritual imbalance within the home. Some dream interpreters even believed that a dream of a black cat watching silently was a sign of unseen energies, either protective spirits or unresolved ancestral issues. In either case, the cat in dreams was never just a pet. It was a guide, a protector, or a warning. And birds soared not just in the sky, but in the myths, the tombs, and the dreams of an entire civilization. So it's no surprise that when animals appeared in dreams, they were never taken lightly. To the Egyptians, these dreams were rich with meaning, often seen as messages from the gods, direct symbols of health, danger, protection, or destiny. The world of ancient Egyptian dream interpretation placed enormous significance on the type of animal that appeared. Let us begin with one of the most beloved and culturally significant animals in ancient Egypt, the cat. Now, move from the gentle presence of cats to something far more fearsome, the crocodile. Another powerful dream symbol was the bird, a creature with divine associations throughout Egyptian mythology. Even the vulture, which modern minds might associate with death, was seen differently by the Egyptians. In some cases, nightmares were not warnings of external threats, but signs of internal struggle. Dreams of being trapped, buried alive, or wandering lost in a desert were believed to reflect a soul out of alignment. Maybe the person had ignored a spiritual calling. It was believed that children, being closer to the spiritual world, were more sensitive to disturbances in the unseen realm. If a child woke screaming, parents would seek guidance from the elders or the local priest. They would examine the child's surroundings, purify the home, and ensure no curses or spiritual disruptions were present. Others drank teas made from lotus flower or blue water lily plants, believed to promote peaceful sleep. Some placed written prayers or sacred symbols beneath their pillows. Others kept amulets shaped like the Eye of Horus or Anubis's jackal head beside their beds, to guard the soul during its nightly journey, or the person's own higher self crying out for attention. The nightmare was not your enemy, it was your teacher. It came dressed in fear, yes, but behind that fear was a lesson, an invitation, or a second chance. Sacred lullabies, protective incantations, and sleep rituals were common. They listened carefully, asking questions not just about the dream, but about the dreamer's recent actions, emotions, and conflicts. They considered the dream's intensity, its emotional charge, and its lingering effect. A nightmare that left the dreamer shaken for days was treated as a sign of serious imbalance. Interpreters prescribed prayers, acts of charity, or in some cases, public confessions and cleansing rituals, especially for young ones who seemed plagued by night terrors. Maybe they had broken a sacred vow. Remember this, in the world of ancient Egypt, that fear was a gift, a coded message, a call to awareness. You were being given something precious, not to terrify you, but to transform you. The gods were not punishing you. They were watching. They were speaking. And in that dark, uneasy dream, they may have said more than words ever could. They were seen as sacred alarms calls from the divine to stop, listen, and change. Dream temples would avoid allowing people to sleep during certain lunar phases, believing the veil between worlds was thinner and more chaotic forces could enter. In such times, people wore protective amulets, avoided certain foods, and kept their homes spiritually fortified. A merchant who dreamt of being robbed might take more care in guarding his wealth. A farmer who saw locusts swarming his fields in a dream might offer prayers to the gods before planting. A woman who dreamt of a crumbling house might be warned about instability in her home life. These dreams were catalysts. They spurred action, reflection, and often spiritual growth. Or maybe they were simply disconnected from their higher self. These dreams served as wake-up calls, urging the dreamer to return to the path of Mat, the principle of truth, balance, and harmony that governed all life. Children's nightmares were taken seriously as well. Interestingly, not all frightening dreams were seen as purely negative. Sometimes the most terrifying visions were considered the most important. The Egyptians also believed that certain times of the month were more likely to produce significant nightmares, especially during the dark moon, when spiritual energy was believed to shift. To guard against nightmares, the Egyptians developed a number of rituals and remedies. Some burned herbs like frankincense and myrrh before bed. Dream interpreters, often trained in temple schools, were not just experts in symbols, they were psychospiritual guides, part healer, part priest, part counselor. Ultimately, Egyptians saw nightmares not as curses, but as sacred interventions. They were the gods shaking the soul, the ancestors whispering from beyond. So when you wake from a nightmare, heart pounding, breath heavy, nightmares, messages, or warnings. Ancient beliefs on bad dreams and their prophetic warnings. In ancient Egypt, not all dreams brought comfort. While many were seen as blessings from the gods, messages of guidance, healing, or prophecy, some dreams arrived with shadows. Life for them wasn't just about the physical. It was a spiritual journey filled with signs and symbols. Sometimes they were seen as alerts about personal behavior. If someone was acting unjustly, disrespecting the gods, or ignoring sacred obligations, falling from heights into water or into darkness symbolized loss of control. Water, in general, symbolized the emotional and spiritual flow of life. Dreaming of being submerged, unable to breathe, or swept away by the Nile meant that the dreamer was overwhelmed, emotionally, physically, or spiritually. It often pointed to suppressed feelings, unresolved grief, or dangerous emotional entanglements. If the dreamer managed to surface or swim to safety, it was seen as a call to resilience. But if they sank or felt helpless, it meant urgent healing was needed, perhaps even ritual purification to realign with the divine. It could mean that the dreamer was about to experience failure, shame, or sudden change. If someone dreamed of falling from a palace, it might indicate a coming drop in status or loss of favor. Falling into water could mean emotional overwhelm. Into fire, spiritual corruption. Dream interpreters paid close attention to where the dreamer landed, or if they landed at all. A fall that ended safely was often seen as a chance for redemption. A fall into endless void, a warning that spiritual grounding had been lost entirely. A nightmare might come to shake them awake spiritually and emotionally. Other times, the nightmare pointed outward toward enemies, illness, or looming danger. Dreaming of death, for example, one's own or another's, was not automatically negative. To the Egyptians, death wasn't the end, but a transition. Dreaming of dying could mean that something in the dreamer's life was ending, a relationship, a season, an identity. But if the dream was terrifying violent death, screaming spirits, or blood, it meant there was something spiritually unclean in the dreamer's life. Perhaps a wrong had not been righted. Perhaps the gods were displeased. Such dreams often led people to seek the help of a temple priest or healer, who would perform rituals to cleanse the dreamer and interpret the message more fully. One could dream of being chased, drowning, or falling, and each of these symbols had layered meanings. The Egyptians believed that evil spirits could influence the dream world, especially when the dreamer was vulnerable, spiritually unprotected, or morally compromised. A figure with no face, eyes that glowed, or voices speaking backwards were signs of supernatural interference. Some believed that these beings were messengers of Set, the god of chaos and disorder. Others saw them as restless spirit souls that had not properly crossed into the afterlife. These dreams demanded immediate action. Priests would recommend protective amulets, the burning of specific herbs, or a recitation of sacred texts. People might sleep with charms beneath their pillow or place offerings at altars to appease whatever force had entered their dream. The gods were always watching. The ancestors were always near. And the unseen forces, both benevolent and chaotic, could influence one's path at any moment. Dreams were one of the main ways these forces communicated. A pleasant dream was a good omen. A terrifying one? That meant something had to be addressed and fast. These darker visions, which we might today call nightmares, were not dismissed or ignored. They were treated with deep seriousness, even reverence. To the ancient Egyptian mind, a frightening dream wasn't just a bad night, it was a warning. A dream where the dreamer is being chased by a beast, a shadow, or a human figure was almost always interpreted as a sign that trouble was coming. This might be betrayal from someone close, a hidden enemy within the dreamer's circle, or even spiritual attack. In some interpretations, being chased wasn't just about fear, it meant the dreamer was running from a responsibility, a truth they didn't want to face. The more aggressive the pursuer, the more urgent the message. Priests would advise such dreamers to reflect deeply on their recent actions, purify themselves spiritually, and offer prayers or sacrifices to seek divine clarity. A sacred sign that something in the dreamer's life, spirit, or surroundings was out of balance. It could be a divine message, a signal from the soul, or a whisper from the world beyond. To understand how Egyptians viewed nightmares, we must first step into their worldview. Nightmares were believed to carry different types of warnings. Let us start with one of the most common themes in ancient Egyptian nightmares, being pursued or attacked. Dreams of falling were equally unsettling. Another haunting symbol in Egyptian nightmares was drowning. Some nightmares were deeply symbolic and disturbing. Nightmares featuring monsters, demons, or shadowy figures were treated with particular caution. Other death-related symbols were rich with layered meanings. Dreaming of being wrapped in linen like a mummy didn't necessarily mean a literal death. Many people dreamt of others' dying friends, family, or even strangers. These dreams were interpreted with care. If the death was peaceful, it might signify a blessing or a spiritual release. Give alms to the poor or perform purification rites. Dreaming of being buried alive could lead a person to confess a lie, of ancestors smiling, or of peaceful fields stretching into eternity. These were known as dreams of assurance gifts from the gods, reminding the dreamer that death, when met with a balanced heart, was nothing to fear. It was simply the next phase of the journey. And just as the sun set each night only to rise again, so too would the soul, carried by sacred dreams into the eternal morning. Release a long-held secret. The ancient Egyptians would tell you, it may not be darkness you're seeing, but transformation. And on the other side of that transformation might be clarity, peace, or even joy. Sleep with an open heart. Let your dreams speak. And if they speak of death, listen closely, for they may be telling you how to live or resolve a broken relationship. These actions weren't just symbolic. They were believed to realign the dreamer with the cosmic balance of Mahat. Egyptians knew that the spiritual world didn't operate in isolation. Dreams were connected to life, and life was preparation for eternity. But if it was violent or frightening, it could indicate emotional tension or foretell a difficult challenge ahead. Not as punishments, but as moments of reflection. In a culture where the afterlife was as real as the Nile itself, dreaming of death was not something to fear. It was something to listen to interpret, and to respond to with heart and humility. The identity of the person in the dream also mattered. Dreaming of the pharaoh's death, for instance, could mean instability in leadership or a loss of national balance. Dreaming of a loved one dying might symbolize a fear of loss, unresolved guilt, or a need to reconnect with that person in waking life. Instead, it might signal the need for spiritual protection, withdrawal from the chaos of the world, or entering a cocoon-like phase of introspection. Dreaming of funerary boats often meant transition, a long journey, a change in life direction, or the need to let go of something emotionally heavy. These boats were seen in temple art as carrying the deceased across the Nile into the next world. But in dreams, they often signified the same kind of crossing, only emotionally or spiritually. Interestingly, not all dreams about death were about the dreamer themselves. The Egyptians also understood that not all dreams of death came from divine sources. Some were believed to be the result of spiritual interference, especially if the dream left the person feeling deeply disturbed or cursed. In these cases, it was thought that malevolent spirits, perhaps jealous ancestors or wandering souls, were reaching through the veil to cause fear or confusion. Rituals were performed to protect the dreamer, including burning sacred herbs, offering prayers, and purifying the bedroom with incense. Amulets representing protective gods like Bes, Anubis, or Horus were placed under pillows or near sleeping areas to guard against spiritual intrusion. Dreams of death also inspired ritual acts in the waking world. Someone who dreamt of dying might visit a temple the next morning to make offerings. Pharaohs, priests, and common people all had dreams of death. And across all social levels, these dreams were seen as opportunities. One of the most beautiful aspects of Egyptian belief was that dreams of death were often accompanied by visions of light. So tonight, if your dreams take you into shadows, don't be afraid. Dream priests, keepers of hidden meanings, roles of priests specializing in dream interpretation. In ancient Egypt, few topics were as deeply revered, studied, and mythologized as death and the afterlife. It wasn't feared in the same way we might imagine today. Instead, death was seen as a transition, a crossing of worlds, a passage from one state of being into another. And for the Egyptians, dreams were one of the most direct ways to glimpse what lay beyond that veil. If a person dreamt of speaking with a deceased relative, friend, or even a historical figure, it was believed that real communication had taken place. In these dreams, the dreamer might find themselves navigating dark corridors, crossing rivers, speaking to animal-headed beings, or witnessing divine judgments. These visions were often interpreted as symbolic rehearsals of what the soul would face after death. Just as the deceased needed the Book of the Dead to navigate the do-it, dreamers believed their dreams could offer glimpses of what to expect, or more importantly, what needed to be resolved before that day came. If a person dreamt of failing the weighing of the heart test, it might mean they had unresolved guilt or needed to correct a wrong in the waking world. If they dreamt of passing it, of being welcomed by Osiris, or sailing with Rhea in the solar boat, it was a sign of spiritual alignment and divine approval. These dreams were often remembered in great detail and shared with temple priests for interpretation. The dead were thought to retain a form of consciousness and agency in the afterlife, and when they appeared in dreams, they came with purpose. Sometimes they offered comfort, letting the dreamer know they were at peace. Other times, they delivered warnings about forgotten obligations, unfinished rituals, or disruptions in the family lineage. These visitations were never random. They were moments of spiritual connection between the living and the departed. In the quiet of night, when the physical body rested and the soul wandered freely, dreams of death were believed to be profound encounters, not with horror. The heart, or ib, was believed to be the seat of thought, memory, and morality. In the afterlife, it was weighed against the feather of Mahat, the principle of truth and balance. Dreaming of your heart being examined or weighed meant that your soul was undergoing judgment, even if only in symbolic form. These dreams spurred people to live righteously, to treat others well, and to keep their hearts light by following moral and spiritual laws. They believed that one's actions in life echoed into death, and dreams were a mirror reflecting those echoes back, but with truth, transformation, and sometimes prophecy. To dream of death in ancient Egypt was not automatically a bad omen. In fact, it was often interpreted as a powerful spiritual experience, one that could signal rebirth, a change of status, or a message from the realm of the dead. Dreaming of tombs, pyramids, the Nile flowing westward, funerary boats, or even the weighing of the heart ceremony were not unusual. These dreams weren't seen as literal predictions of someone's immediate death. Rather, they symbolized change, endings, or spiritual evolution. A person who dreamt of being buried might be undergoing a personal transformation, leaving behind an old identity and preparing to step into a new phase of life. Just as the physical body was preserved through mummification to journey safely into the afterlife, the dreamer was spiritually preparing to undergo some inner transition. The Egyptians held a complex view of the afterlife. They believed in multiple parts of the Sulka Akh with distinct roles in life and after death. When a person slept, it was believed that the Ba, or the soul's mobile form, could leave the body and travel through spiritual realms, including the Duat, the mysterious underworld governed by Osiris, Anubis, and other divine beings. Dreams, therefore, became a kind of training ground for death, a place to learn, receive warnings, or even speak with those who had already passed on. Many dreams featured imagery directly tied to the afterlife. Dreams of meeting the dead were especially significant. One of the most powerful and sacred dream themes in ancient Egypt was the journey through the underworld. The symbol of the heart often appeared in such dreams. Certain herbs were burned in the room to cleanse negative energies and promote spiritual clarity. Frankincense, for example, was believed to purify the space and elevate the soul. Myrrh offered grounding energy, helping the dreamer stay calm and focused. Juniper, though less common, was used to keep away malevolent spirits that might interfere with the dream world, but taught others how to prepare for and honor them. Egyptians believed that the moon influenced the soul's access to divine realms. Certain nights were more powerful for receiving visions, while others were best avoided. For example, during the full moon, when the Ba was believed to be most active, Dreams were said to be especially vivid and revealing. On these nights, dream rituals became more elaborate, sometimes involving group ceremonies where multiple people would sleep in the same sacred space, sharing their dreams the next morning. And close your eyes not just to rest, but to receive. Let your dreams become more than memory. Let them become a message, a practice, a portal, and who knows? Like the ancients, you might just find that the answers you seek are waiting in the silence beyond sleep. They were consulted during important life decisions, marriage, travel, business, or healing. A well-respected dream priest could even influence political choices, especially when dreams were believed to carry national significance. These herbs weren't just spiritual tools, they were part of a larger practice that wove together. In a world of noise, screens, and stress, we drift into sleep without preparation, without reflection, without ritual. But the Egyptians remind us that sleep can be sacred, that with a little intention, a little reverence, and perhaps the scent of burning frankincense or the touch of lotus petals, we can create space for something extraordinary, the physical, emotional, and spiritual dimensions of dreaming. Those mourning a loved one would often seek to contact the deceased through dreams. Special rituals were performed to open the veil, allowing the spirit of the departed to visit during sleep. When a dream connection was made, the dreamer often woke with peace, closure, or new instructions, perhaps to perform a burial rite properly, deliver a message, or complete a vow made in life. These dreams became spiritual bridges, carrying comfort and direction across the chasm of death. Another essential part of Egyptian dream ritual was intentional dreaming, what we might today call lucid dreaming. The dreamer would set an intention before sleep. We see a profound truth. The ancient Egyptians did not believe that dreams just happened. They believed dreams could be cultivated, called upon, and clarified through intention, devotion, and ritual. The night wasn't merely unconscious time. It was a sacred realm and opportunity for communion with gods, ancestors, and the deepest parts of the self. They might be instructed to perform a cleansing ritual over 3 nights, bathing at dawn, anointing the body with oil, sleeping with a sacred text beside the bed, and reciting a protective verse at sunset. If a person sought a vision from a particular deity, they might wear a garment colored or embroidered with symbols sacred to that god. The rituals were as diverse as the dreams themselves, but all shared the same goal: to bridge the gap between mortal and divine. A typical prayer might sound like, "O Thoth, scribe of the heavens," often simple scrolls or clay tablets, to record and study their dreams over time. These records weren't just personal, they could be shared with priests or family members, to uncover long-term patterns or spiritual messages that unfolded slowly. Some households passed down these journals like heirlooms, believing that the dreams of one generation could contain messages for the next. Let my soul walk the path of truth and receive your sacred vision in the hours of rest. The intention helped direct the soul's journey during sleep, ensuring that the dream had focus and purpose. This practice was especially important for those seeking answers to specific questions, whether related to health, love, family, or divine destiny. Sometimes priests or dream interpreters would create custom rituals for individuals based on their needs. The Egyptians also used dream journals. There was also a special class of spiritual practitioners known as dream specialists or dream priests. These individuals not only interpreted dreams, dream rituals were also tailored by lunar phases and astrological timing. Perhaps one of the most touching aspects of these rituals was their use in grieving and healing. In all of these practices, and maybe that's what we've forgotten. So tonight, try this. Light a candle, speak an intention, Herbs and rituals to influence dreams, rituals Egyptians performed to enhance or clarify dreams. In ancient Egypt, dreams were never left entirely to chance. They weren't just passive experiences or random flickers of the subconscious. Then one can create the right conditions to hear them more clearly. This idea gave rise to an entire body of spiritual practices designed specifically for dream enhancement. This vibrant, water-dwelling flower, with its deep indigo petals and intoxicating aroma, was used not only in ceremonies and art, but also as a tool for spiritual exploration. When steeped in wine or brewed into tea, though they might not have access to temple facilities, many Egyptians kept personal shrines or altars in their homes. Before sleep, they would light incense, say prayers, and sometimes draw protective symbols on their bodies or bedding. The Eye of Horus, representing protection and insight, was a common motif used in such rituals. Amulets were also popular. Small charms representing gods, sacred animals, or symbols of wisdom were worn or placed under pillows to attract positive dreams and ward off nightmares. The petals of the blue lotus were said to produce a dreamlike, meditative state, enhancing not just the quality of dreams, but the dreamer's ability to remember and interpret them. It was so revered that images of the flower often included in tomb art, symbolizing rebirth and divine vision. Those seeking to connect with the gods through dreams would sip blue lotus elixirs before sleep, or simply place the flower near their bed as an offering. Whether it was to receive a prophetic vision, communicate with ancestors, or gain insight into a troubling problem. Much like other spiritual traditions, the Egyptians believed that abstaining from certain foods or indulgences could sharpen the spiritual senses. Fasting before a night of dream incubation allowed the body to become more receptive and less burdened by physical distractions. In some cases, this fasting was accompanied by chanting, prayer, or periods of silence, all meant to create a sense of spiritual alignment before sleep. Egyptians approached dreaming with the same intentionality they brought to any other sacred rite. A person seeking a prophetic dream might spend several days in solitude within temple grounds. During this time, they would follow a strict regimen: daily bathing, quiet reflection, prayer to gods like Thoth, Serapis, or Imhotep. Offerings of bread, beer, incense, or flowers would be placed at temple altars. The dreamer might sleep on special mats or stone benches carved with protective symbols, often near sacred pools or beneath domed ceilings aligned with constellations. The environment itself was crafted to support one goal: open the soul to divine communication through dreams. To the Egyptians, dreams were deliberate spiritual conversations that could be guided. Before attempting to receive a dream, especially one of importance, the dreamer would undergo a physical and spiritual cleansing process. This might include bathing in sacred water, typically drawn from the Nile at specific lunar phases or blessed by temple priests. The body would be washed with fragrant oils, often infused with herbs like myrrh, frankincense, or blue lotus. These weren't chosen for scent alone. Each herb had symbolic and energetic properties believed to attract specific kinds of dreams. Blue lotus, for instance, was known to induce vivid, often euphoric dream states, and was associated with divine enlightenment and spiritual elevation, enhanced, and even requested. Just as one would prepare to visit a temple or make an offering to a god, dreaming too was treated with sacred preparation. The night wasn't just a time for rest. It was an opportunity to receive healing, to ask questions, to seek guidance from the divine. And for those who took their dreams seriously, the Egyptians developed a system of rituals, herbs, incantations, and practices meant to influence the dream world with purpose and precision. The foundation of this belief was simple yet profound. If the gods speak through dreams, one of the most common methods for enhancing dream clarity was the use of ritual purification. Blue lotus was perhaps the most famous dream herb in ancient Egypt. Another key element in preparing for dream work was ritual fasting. In sacred spaces like dream temples, this process of preparation was even more detailed. At home, similar practices were adapted for ordinary people. Other dreams brought comfort during illness. Someone close to death might dream of sailing peacefully on the Nile, guided by the god Ra. These dreams weren't seen as cures, but as signs of acceptance, of readiness, and of the soul's transition into the next world. For the family, such dreams offered solace, affirming that their loved one was being watched over. Dreamers often slept with amulets under their pillow symbols like the ankh. A grandmother might recognize a dream of a lion as a sign of internal anger or suppressed truth. A father might recall a similar dream from his youth and share the remedy that helped him. A laborer might dream of his limbs turning to stone and be told he needs rest, not punishment. A question we didn't know we were asking. The Egyptians would urge us not to dismiss it. They would tell us to write it down, reflect, and ask what healing it might hold. A child with fever might dream of being bathed in moonlight and recover the next day. And remember, in the silent world of dreams, the answers you need might already be waiting softly, patiently, just beyond the veil of consciousness. A grieving widow might dream of her husband smiling at her from across the Nile, giving her the strength to carry on. These stories filled the villages, homes, and temples of Egypt, reminders that health was not just in the hands of doctors, but in the dreams of every soul. In this way, dream healing became part of communal wisdom, a tradition passed down, shaped not only by religion but by lived experience. The Eye of Horus, or a figure of Imhotep. Homes were filled with symbols designed to promote healing energy, images of gods, bowls of sacred water, and bundles of herbs. Some even placed small papyrus scrolls with healing verses beside their beds, believing that the written word could attract divine attention, that the passage from life to afterlife would be gentle and blessed. Even every day, people use dreams to monitor their health. If a person dreamt of their body rotting or falling apart, it was seen as a signal of inner decay, perhaps a warning of real illness or moral disconnection. Dreams of bleeding, drowning, or being trapped in a body that wouldn't move were interpreted as signs of spiritual blockage, emotional repression, or physical imbalance. These symbols weren't random, they were diagnostic tools from the subconscious, reflecting imbalances the dreamer hadn't yet addressed in waking life. To enhance healing dreams, Egyptians turned to rituals and sacred objects. In families, elders often helped interpret healing dreams. One of the most fascinating elements of this practice is how closely it aligns with modern holistic medicine. Today, we recognize that emotional stress can trigger physical symptoms, that the subconscious holds truths we sometimes ignore, and that intention, ritual, and rest are crucial to healing. The Egyptians knew this thousands of years ago. They just expressed it through their own lens, one filled with gods, symbols, and sacred dreams. Dream healing was not reserved for priests or royalty. It belonged to everyone. Even today, when we wake from a vivid dream, we feel something linger, a message, a mood. So tonight, as you lay your head down to sleep, ask for insight. Ask for healing. Dreams of healing and health. How Egyptians believed dreams could predict or heal illness. In the ancient Egyptian world, health was never seen as just a physical issue. To them, sickness was as much a spiritual disruption as it was a bodily condition. It was a sacred message, sometimes from the gods, sometimes from one's own soul, and often from the unseen forces that govern life and health. When illness arose, be it fever, fatigue, infection, or emotional despair, one of the first responses wasn't just to find a healer. A woman suffering from chronic stomach pain might dream of walking through a garden where one plant glowed brighter than the others. Sometimes they revealed the root of the illness. Egyptians believed that sickness could be caused by more than germs or wounds. It could come from emotional trauma, spiritual imbalance, or even divine punishment for broken vows or social transgressions. A man plagued by sleeplessness might dream of being chased by shadow symbols of guilt or unresolved tension. A woman with chest pains might dream of weeping in front of her ancestors' tomb, suggesting a neglected family duty or unfulfilled promise. In both cases, the dream pointed not to a physical treatment, but to a spiritual correction. Upon waking, she'd describe the plant, and the healer would identify it, perhaps as chamomile, mint, or blue lotus, and prepare a tea or compress accordingly. The belief was that the soul, unburdened by the physical senses during sleep, could see clearly what the waking self could not. In this way, the dream was not just diagnostic, it was prescriptive. But to look inward, to sleep, and to listen to the messages that came in the dark. Dreams were the space where healing began, to give offerings or to confess a secret that had long weighed them down. These prophetic dreams were seen as gifts, early warnings from the gods, allowing the dreamer to make changes before sickness took root. A merchant might dream of a snake biting his leg not as a sign of physical harm, but as a message to be cautious of betrayal or deception in his business dealings. If he ignored the warning, stress or conflict might lead to illness. But if he took action, adjusted his behavior, made peace with a partner, he could avoid both spiritual and physical consequences. The act of acknowledging the spiritual cause was, to the Egyptian mind, as healing as any physical remedy. Once the spiritual wound was treated, the physical body could begin to restore itself. Healing wasn't only found in herbs or potions, it was also found in silence and prayer and ritual ... And most of all, in dreams. Egyptians believed that dreams could foretell illness, explain suffering, and even provide cures directly from the divine. Or of being washed in lotus water. They might see a certain herb appear over and over again, or hear a voice instruct them to visit a particular healer, or confess a buried truth. These dreams were taken seriously. Upon waking, the dreamer would describe every detail to the temple priest, who served as both interpreter and guide. The priest might say, "You must prepare a poultice with figs and honey," or offer this prayer 3 times before sleep, or "The illness comes not from the body, but from your broken word." The advice wasn't always medical in the modern sense, but it was deeply rooted in Egypt's holistic understanding of well-being. It was a system of wellness that saw no separation between body, mind, and spirit. And for many, dreams were not just rest, they were remedies. For the ancient Egyptians, a dream was more than just a replay of the day's thoughts. The foundation of Egyptian medicine itself was spiritual. Priests often served double roles as physicians, and temples were both religious and medical centers. The most famous of these was the Temple of Imhotep, the architect turned god of healing, where people came from across Egypt to sleep in sacred chambers, hoping for healing visions. These were known as incubation dreams, dreams sought through ritual sleep, meant to deliver answers, remedies, or revelations. Before sleeping in such temples, a patient would go through days of purification, bathing in holy water, fasting, praying, and offering tokens to the gods. When they finally laid down to sleep, it wasn't just rest they were hoping for, it was contact, a divine encounter, a sacred prescription, and often, they believed, that's exactly what they received. A person might dream of being touched by the god Imhotep. One of the most common types of healing dreams involved herbs and natural remedies. But dreams didn't only reveal treatments. To heal, the dreamer might be told to apologize to someone they hurt. Some dreams were even believed to ward off illness before it began. But what made Cleopatra unique was her ability to blend Egyptian and Hellenistic traditions. While she performed traditional Egyptian dream rituals in temples and shrines, she also studied Greek philosophy and dream interpretation, perhaps including the early texts of Artemidorus or other Hellenistic thinkers. This gave her a broader understanding of the psychological and symbolic power of dreams, making her one of the most multidimensional users of dream work in history. In her final days, surrounded by threat and betrayal, she used them not only to understand her future, but to control the narrative of her present. She teaches us that when dreams are honored through ritual, reflection, and purpose, they can guide not only personal growth, but the course of history itself. Consider this. You don't need to be a queen to dream like royalty. You just need to enter the night with intention, listen closely, and honor what you find. Who knows, maybe the gods still whisper to those willing to prepare for their dreams. Her power didn't lie only in her alliances or her intellect. It lay in her mastery of symbolism, and nowhere was that more profound than in her use of dreams. Cleopatra is said to have consulted the gods through ritual sleep one last time. Some legends claim she had a final vision, perhaps of her own death, or of her soul ascending. Dreams weren't just ideas, they were causes. If a pharaoh or queen had a dream, the court took it seriously. Entire shifts in state policy, military movement, or temple architecture could come from a single dream declared by royalty. In some cases, dreams were even written into law, with the divine message used to validate controversial decisions. Royal scribes would record these dreams in scrolls, some of which ended up in the archives of temples or libraries for generations. Whether these stories are fact or poetic invention, they reflect a deep cultural truth that dreams were the last refuge of divine wisdom, especially for a ruler whose physical world was collapsing. She did not meet her end with fear. She met it as someone who had prepared through prayer, ritual, and dream for whatever lay beyond. Dream rituals were also used by other queens and royal women. Nefertari, the beloved wife of Ramesses II, had her own shrine with cosmic symbolism where she may have practiced sacred dreaming. Her tomb, one of the most beautifully decorated in Egypt, features her ascending to the afterlife not in fear but in peace, perhaps the result of nightly visions that prepared her for the next life. Royal women often use dreams to ensure fertility, protect their children, or gain insight into palace dynamics. A queen's dream of a scorpion or a storm might result in protective amulets being distributed to her servants or rituals performed to calm political tensions. These dreams were never separate from action. For Cleopatra, dreams were her compass, her shield, and her strategy. In the modern world, we often view dreams as unconscious noise, but Cleopatra reminds us they can be intentional, sacred, and powerful. So tonight, when you drift into sleep, dream rituals of Cleopatra and royalty, how Egypt's most famous rulers used dreams strategically. In the world of ancient Egypt, dreams were sacred for everyone, but for royalty, they were strategy. The Egyptian empire was under immense pressure from Rome, internal divisions, and economic strain. Yet Cleopatra positioned herself not just as a political leader, but as a divinely guided monarch. Like the pharaohs before her, or declarations, Cleopatra would undergo ritual purification, bathing in sacred water. Pharaohs, including Cleopatra, used dream narratives to justify power. The goddess appeared to me and said, wasn't simply poetic, it was a political announcement. Egyptian royalty across dynasties used dreams as blueprints for temples, as warnings before battles, and even as evidence of succession. Pharaoh Seti I, for example, was said to have dreamed of a great temple to Osiris, which he then built in Abydos. Ramesses II reportedly had dreams of divine guidance during wartime. The dream stele of Thutmose IV told the story of how he was chosen to be king after a dream beside the Sphinx. This wasn't new. Cleopatra was following in a long line of rulers who saw dreaming as a political institution as much as a spiritual one. When Cleopatra aligned herself with Isis, she wasn't just invoking divine femininity, she was announcing that she had the wisdom, the vision, and the approval of the divine to lead. Dream rituals gave her authority not only over her people, but in diplomacy, where Roman leaders were often baffled by how much influence she could wield with so little military backing, anointing her body with oils, reciting hymns to the gods. She would sleep alone in temple chambers, often beneath ceilings painted with stars, simulating the cosmic connection between the heavens and her mind. There she would seek visions, and whether those dreams arrived through genuine sleep or through trance-like meditation, Cleopatra would emerge with messages, decisions she claimed were inspired not by her alone, but by Isis or Hathor or Neith. She drew from Egypt's rich tradition of dream rituals to enhance her image and decisions. The people believed that dreams were one of the gods' most intimate ways. Cleopatra, understanding the power of belief, would speak of dreams where victory was assured or betrayal was revealed, setting expectations among her allies and enemies alike. When her alliances with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony shook the foundations of global power, Cleopatra reportedly claimed to have seen those unions foretold in dreams. These were not coincidences. They were declarations of destiny, of communicating with the chosen. Her personal chambers were said to be laced with blue lotus and myrrhs, known to induce spiritual visions. Musicians or attendants might chant softly before she slept, invoking divine protection and guidance. The walls of her inner chambers were decorated with sacred symbols, stars, and hieroglyphs, all tools for keeping her psyche aligned with her spiritual goals. She did not dream by accident, she dreamed with intent. Few in Cleopatra used this belief as both a personal guide and a political asset. For pharaohs and queens, dreams weren't just personal visions or spiritual curiosities. They were tools of power, political insight, and often deliberate performances of divine favor. Egypt's rulers believed they had a direct line to the gods, and that connection was most alive during sleep. They cultivated it through ritual, used it to guide decisions, and perhaps most intriguingly used it to shape public perception. Among these rulers, none was more enigmatic and fascinating than Cleopatra VII, the last active pharaoh of Egypt, who understood not only the power of dreams, but the power of using them wisely. Cleopatra lived in a time of crisis and transformation. Historical records, though fragmented, suggest Cleopatra was deeply immersed in the spiritual traditions of both Egypt and the Hellenistic world. She was fluent in multiple languages, well-versed in medicine, philosophy, and theology. Her interest in dreams wasn't passive. It was educated, ritualized, and purposeful. Cleopatra is believed to have observed incubation rituals, nights of sacred sleep, within temples dedicated to Isis, the goddess she most strongly associated with. These rituals weren't just private affairs. They were often witnessed, discussed, or hinted at in public life to reinforce the idea that Cleopatra's choices were divinely ordained. Before critical political decisions, alliances, confrontations, dreams in royal life weren't just for guidance. They were performed as evidence of legitimacy. In fact, some scholars believe Cleopatra used dreams to manage perceptions of fate and control. In Egyptian thought, dreams often predicted outcomes. Cleopatra's dream rituals also involved scent, sound, and space. She believed in crafting the environment around sleep. And Cleopatra wasn't alone in this practice. Dream temples across Egypt were constructed with this cosmic alignment in mind. Their windows, ceilings, and sacred chambers were oriented to match celestial events. Certain rooms were reserved for full moon dreaming. Others were only used when Sirius was visible. Some dream beds were placed directly under painted constellations. She understood the power of timing, not just politically, but cosmically. Her ability to synchronize her personal spiritual practices with the movements of the stars only strengthened her image as a queen touched by divine intelligence. It wasn't superstition, it was strategy, built on ancient knowledge that dreams, like everything else in Egyptian life, followed the rhythm of the heavens, allowing the dreamer to align symbolically and energetically with the cosmos as they slept. In our modern lives, we often treat sleep as something automatic, something that just happens. But for the Egyptians, sleep was sacred, and ask yourself, is this a night for answers? A night for healing? Or perhaps a night to wait, to prepare, to honor the rhythm of the universe until the moment is right? For in Egypt, they believed that the gods don't just speak, they speak in season, and dreams were time-sensitive messages. If you wanted to receive one, you didn't just close your eyes. You listened to the moon. You watched the stars. You waited until the heavens opened. The connection wasn't just metaphorical, it was built into the very stone and structure of sacred space. In personal life, ordinary Egyptians also practiced dream timing. Farmers waited for certain moon phases to ask for guidance about planting or weather. Each month had specific characteristics based on lunar and solar positions, or what we might now call their astrological profile. Egyptians believed that the moment of your birth was sacred and that the planetary and stellar positions at that moment influenced your soul's journey. Some high-status individuals, especially royals and temple initiates, had birth records detailing their personal planetary alignments. Dreams experienced on nights when those same planets were visible were considered soul-aligned dreams, the most personal and meaningful of all. Some days were considered dream days, times when dreams were more likely to carry true meaning. Temple priests kept dream calendars, similar to almanacs, which told people when to sleep for divine guidance and when to wait. These calendars even categorized dreams by timing. A dream on the 5th day of the month under a waxing moon might be interpreted very differently than a similar dream on the 20th day with the moon in decline. Timing was everything. Mothers tracked the stars before sleeping beside a sick child, hoping for healing dreams. Traders preparing to take goods up the Nile would fast and sleep on nights when Venus or Mercury were strong, seeking good fortune or warnings about the road ahead. These practices weren't fringe, they were everyday wisdom, passed from families to children, shared among neighbors, and confirmed by temple astrologers when needed. The Egyptian calendar itself was infused with astrological symbolism. One of the most fascinating aspects of Egyptian dream timing was how it intersected with the individual's birth chart. Cleopatra herself was said to consult astrologers before her dream rituals. It's easy to forget how deeply the ancient world trusted in divine timing. So tonight, look up before you go to bed. Notice the moon. See what stars are shining. Egyptian astrology and dream timing, how astrological beliefs shaped the interpretation of dreams. In the heart of ancient Egypt, beneath a sky filled with stars and constellations that shimmered over the Nile, the people believed that dreams didn't just happen randomly, they were timed. They believed that when a dream occurred was just as important as what it contained. Dreams were seen as messages from the gods, yes, but those messages were carried on the winds of the stars. This period was seen as a time when chaotic or misleading dreams might appear. Among the most revered was the Sirius star, known to the Egyptians as Sopdet, the celestial marker of the Nile's annual flooding. Its appearance in the night sky wasn't just an astronomical event, it was a spiritual portal. Dreams during the heliacal rising of Sirius were believed to carry messages of rebirth, abundance, and divine approval. This period, usually around mid-July, was marked with ceremonies, temple sleep, and dream rituals across Egypt. Dreams experienced during this sacred time were considered oracles, guidance from the gods about the coming year, fertility of the land, and even national events. Some believed the absence of moonlight made it easier for malevolent spirits to interfere with the soul's nightly journey. Venus, associated with Hathor and love, was said to enhance dreams of beauty, relationships, and emotional healing when visible in the night sky. Mars, linked to aggression and energy, might signal dreams filled with conflict, decision-making, or confrontation. Jupiter, considered a kingly star, was connected to dreams of power, leadership, and spiritual expansion. Egyptian astrologers tracked these planetary positions and advised dream seekers on when to sleep, where to sleep, and even what to ask in their prayers before bed. People were advised not to perform important dream rituals during the new moon unless specifically instructed by a priest, or unless deep shadow work confronting one's fears, guilt, or suppressed truths was the goal. Protective amulets, incense, and purification rituals were often used during this time to safeguard the dreamer's soul, shaped by the positions of the planets, the phases of the moon, and the spiritual resonance of each night. To the Egyptians, the cosmos was not distant, it was deeply personal. The stars above were not just lights in the sky, they were signs. Divine markers that revealed when the veil between worlds was thin and the dream world was open. Astrology in ancient Egypt wasn't quite like modern horoscopes, but it was no less sophisticated, aligning many of their spiritual activities with its waxing and waning light. It was believed that the full moon amplified divine presence and made dreams more vivid, prophetic, and emotionally charged. A dream that occurred under a full moon was considered especially potent. If a person received a vision or visitation during this time, it was often shared with temple priests for communal interpretation. These dreams were seen as divine announcements, messages meant not just for the individual, but for their family or even the state. The Egyptians tracked the movement of stars, planets, and moon cycles with precision. They believed these celestial bodies influence all aspects of life, agriculture, marriage, health, and especially spiritual communication through dreams. The temple astrologers and priest astronomers, highly trained scholars, who studied the heavens, played a vital role in this system. Their job was to determine the best nights for dream rituals, divination, and sleep in sacred spaces. And their guidance shaped how dreams were sought, interpreted, and honored across the land. The most important celestial body in Egyptian dream timing was the moon. Egyptians observed the moon cycles carefully. In contrast, the new moon, when the sky was dark and the moon invisible, was treated with caution. Another key factor in dream timing was the position of specific stars and constellations. The movement of planets also played a role in dream timing. Let's take a moment to compare two dream entries, one from the Ramesside dream book and one from a modern source. From the ancient scroll, if a man sees himself drinking beer, it means good fortune is coming. From a modern dream dictionary, to dream of drinking alcohol suggests a desire for relaxation, celebration, or emotional relief. But the energy is the same. Both see the drink not as the issue, but as the emotion beneath it. Different wording, yes. Again, the underlying truth aligns. Another from the Ramesside book. If a man sees himself eaten by a crocodile, it means an enemy has power over him. In modern interpretation, being eaten a dream is often seen as a metaphor for being overwhelmed, consumed by fear, or threatened by external stress. What this tells us is that symbols are not tied to culture alone, they tap into something deeper. Archetypes, as Jung called them. Ancient Egyptians lived in a deeply spiritual world, where gods were ever present and morality was cosmically enforced. What symbols appeared in your dreams last night? What feelings did they stir? What truths might they hold? Their dreams were not just emotional, they were messages with consequences. You're part of the same story, a story where sleep is sacred and the soul still speak. A bad dream could mean a warning from the divine. They were intuitive. They knew that sleep was sacred, that dreams are not accidents, but invitations. And we, in our fast, digital, analytical world, can benefit by remembering that. A good one might signal a spiritual reward. Today, we tend to see dreams more internally as reflections of our psyche rather than external messages. We're more likely to ask, what does this dream say about me? Rather than, what does this dream say about the world? Universal images that live in the human psyche, no matter where or when we are. That they are mirrors, maps, and sometimes messengers. Whether you're sleeping in a temple beside the Nile or in a modern apartment, your dreams are speaking. The symbols may shift, the gods may change names, but the purpose remains: to guide, to heal, to awaken. But there are differences too. Still, both systems recognize that dreams matter. Perhaps the biggest takeaway is this: dreams are timeless. So, what can we learn from decoding dreams with modern eyes? We can learn that our ancestors weren't primitive or naive. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, take a moment to reflect. Whether you reach for a hieroglyph or a psychology book, decoding dreams with modern eyes, comparing ancient Egyptian dream symbols with modern dream interpretation. Dreams are as old as humanity itself. Since the beginning of time, people have looked into the dark canvas of the night. They represented both danger and divine protection. A snake biting you in a dream might signal betrayal or illness. To dream of a pyramid meant that your soul was seeking higher truth or guidance. Today, a dream of a pyramid might not be seen as a literal spiritual ascent. In Egyptian dreams, birds, especially falcons and ibises, were signs of divine messages, guidance, or freedom. Today, dream analysts still view birds as symbols of the soul, higher thought, or a desire for liberation. Where an Egyptian priest might have advised ritual cleansing after a terrifying dream, a modern psychologist might suggest journaling or shadow work. In both cases, the goal is the same: understand what the dream is trying to say and realign with your truth. If you're flying with birds, it might mean you're rising above your worries. We now understand REM sleep, brainwaves, and how memory and emotion shape our dreams. But even with all our technology, the meaning behind the dream remains mysterious. We still turn to symbol books, therapists, or even AI for insight, and the symbols. They're still alive, still potent. If a bird is trapped, perhaps your voice or spirit feels confined. Once again, the bridge between past and present is clear. Both worlds see wings as more than feathers. They're signals of what our soul longs to do. But modern dream coaches often interpret pyramids or towering structures as symbols of ambition, legacy, or the search for meaning. Dreaming of a jackal in Egypt meant that you were approaching change, that something needed to end before something new could begin. In modern terms, this maps closely to dreams involving death or symbols of decay, not necessarily as omens, but as metaphors for transformation. Therapists often describe these dreams as signs that the psyche is shedding layers, releasing baggage, or preparing for rebirth. Ancient and modern voices are in harmony here. Endings are not failures, they're thresholds. If you're climbing one, it might mean you're aiming high. If it crumbles, perhaps a belief system or life plan is collapsing. The symbol remains rich with personal and spiritual significance. But a calm snake, especially a cobra, often symbolize transformation, rebirth, or protection from evil. Symbols of inner balance or quiet power. In modern dream dictionaries, cats often represent intuition, independence, or a mystery, especially when they appear suddenly or stare without speaking. Some dreamers say a cat's behavior in a dream reflects their emotional landscape. Is it friendly, defensive, hiding? Egyptians would ask the same questions. Fast forward to modern dream psychology, and the meaning holds surprisingly steady. Psychologists like Carl Jung and modern dream analysts often view snakes as symbols of deep change, hidden fears, or rising intuition. Jung even associated snakes with the shadow self, the parts of us we try to ignore but must face to grow. So while the language has changed, the core remains. A snake in a dream is a signal from the depths. Something is shifting. Something is emerging. And seeing visions, some strange, some beautiful, some terrifying, and ask the same question: what does it mean? In ancient Egypt, dream interpretation was not only a spiritual tool, but a respected science. Symbols carried clear cultural meanings, dream guides were written and studied, and the divine was believed to speak directly through the symbols of sleep. Thousands of years later, we're still asking those same questions. But now, we view dreams through the lens of modern psychology, neurology, and emotional awareness. So, how do the ancient interpretations compare with what we believe today? Are they outdated myth, or is there a timeless wisdom hidden in the symbols of both worlds? Let's begin with one of the most common dream symbols, the snake. In ancient Egypt, snakes had a dual nature. Now consider the Nile River, the very lifeblood of Egypt. In ancient Egyptian dreams, a calm Nile represented peace, abundance, and divine alignment. A wild, flooding Nile warned of emotional turmoil or spiritual imbalance. In modern interpretations, rivers often symbolize emotional states, the flow of life, the ability to let go, or the transitions we're going through. A smooth river can mean ease, acceptance. A turbulent one might signal anxiety or resistance. Again, the parallels are striking. Both the ancient priest and the modern therapist might tell you, look at the water. It reflects what's going on inside. Pyramids, the iconic symbols of Egypt, were powerful in dreams too. Egyptians saw them as spiritual monuments, gateways to the divine. Cats, sacred animals in ancient Egypt, were associated with protection, feminine energy, and the goddess Bastet. In dreams, cats were protectors. Let's turn to birds, another frequent symbol. Another powerful ancient image is the jackal, linked to Anubis, the god of death and transition. What's fascinating is that even nightmares, which Egyptians viewed as warnings or spiritual disturbances, are seen today as messages from the subconscious. Of course, modern science offers explanations the ancients didn't have. Chapter 15. Your own Egyptian dream journey. Guided exercise for listeners to apply Egyptian interpretation techniques. You've traveled far through the world of ancient Egyptian dreams. You've stood beneath temple ceilings painted with stars, walked through the dream chambers of pharaohs, and uncovered symbols hidden in the sacred silence of the night. But now, the journey turns inward, because tonight, it's no longer about what the Egyptians believed. It's about what you will dream and what those dreams can reveal to you. This can be as simple as washing your face or hands with cool water. Breathe deeply. Let your spine settle, your limbs grow heavy. Focus on your breath for a few moments, just as the Egyptian dreamers did before entering sacred sleep. And when the dream comes, whether it's vivid or vague, strange or soothing, trust it. Don't force it to make sense in the moment. Simply experience it. Let it unfold. If you wake in the night, lie still. Does the dream speak to that question in any way? Does it offer clarity or more mystery? Begin the decoding. Use your knowledge of Egyptian dream symbols, or modern ones, or both. Trust your intuition. If a cat appeared, did it feel protective or elusive? If you were flying, were you soaring with freedom or escaping from fear? If you were underwater, were you drowning or discovering something beneath the surface? Revisit the dream in your mind. Hold it like a fragile artifact. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. Let each exhale carry you closer to stillness. If it was unclear, treat it like a riddle. Perhaps the meaning will come tomorrow or a week from now. The Egyptians believed dreams could speak across time. Some messages were immediate. Others took patience. Don't worry if it's incomplete. Even a single symbol can carry deep meaning. Was there water? It was about relationship between the self and the soul, the mortal and the divine, the night and what lies within it. They didn't just dream, they prepared, they recorded, they acted. You've begun your own dream journey, one that honors both the wisdom of the ancients and the depth of your own inner world. You're not just sleeping, you're listening. You're aligning with something deeper. A snake? A voice? A building? Was there a feeling, fear, joy, peace, confusion? Right, all of it? The Egyptians believed that how a dream felt was just as important as what it showed. With your eyes closed, imagine you are standing before a temple gate under the stars. This is your personal dream temple. It may look like stone and gold, or it may appear differently made of light, water, or memory. Trust what comes. See yourself walking through the gate and into the space within. You're ready. As you do, imagine cleansing not just the skin, but the emotional weight of the day. Once a week, or even once a month, repeat the process. Over time, you'll begin to see patterns. You'll develop your own dream dictionary, your own temple language. Your dreams will become clearer, more responsive. Because the truth is, when you treat your dreams with respect, they open up to you. The ancient dreamers spoke prayers to gods like Thoth, Imhotep, Isis, or Horus, asking for insight. You can use their names if they speak to you, or create your own mantra, like, let the water carry away your stress, your worries, your distractions. Dry yourself slowly with care. This is your initiation. You are preparing to enter the dream world, not as a wanderer, but as a seeker. In this final chapter, we'll take a step-by-step journey into a modern version of an Egyptian dream. Ritual, a guided process rooted in ancient wisdom that you can use to prepare for your own dream. Receive its message and begin decoding it with eyes both ancient and modern. Let's begin, just as the Egyptians did, with intention. Before sleep, they never stepped into the dream world casually. They believed the dream realm was a sacred space, and so they approached it with respect. Tonight, do the same. As you prepare for sleep, pause and ask yourself, what question am I carrying into this dream? Maybe it's something simple like clarity on a relationship or a decision you need to make. Maybe it's something deeper, like healing from past wounds, or the desire to understand your purpose. Whatever it is, write it down. Speak it aloud. Offer it to the night like a question whispered into a temple corridor. Let your soul know that you are ready to receive. Now create a sacred space. The ancient Egyptians believed that your physical environment shaped your spiritual one. You don't need a pyramid or a priest, but you do need a sense of peace. Tidy your sleeping area. Dim the lights. Light a candle if you can, one that burns slowly and safely, or even an electric one to set the tone. Burn incense or diffuse a calming scent, frankincense. Myrrh, sandalwood, or blue lotus if you have it. These are the scents that once filled Egyptian temples, designed to soothe the senses and open the spirit. If you can place a small object near your bed, a stone, a feather, an image that means something to you. Let it serve as a personal totem, your modern-day amulet, anchoring your intention. Before lying down, perform a cleansing ritual. Lie down now, slowly, deliberately. As you drift towards sleep, repeat a simple invocation. I welcome the dream. I receive its wisdom. I remember what I need. Now sleep. In the morning, before checking your phone or rising too quickly, take a few moments to reflect. Write down everything you remember. Now, return to your intention. Read what you wrote before sleep. Ask these questions. What was the most striking image in the dream? How did I feel during and after the dream? Was anyone guiding me, or was I alone? Did the dream repeat anything from my waking life? What might this dream be asking me to change, face, or embrace? If the dream offered a clear message, write it down like a decree. Once you've journaled, end the practice with gratitude. Thank your dream, your body, your spirit. Make this a regular ritual. And that is the heart of the Egyptian dream tradition. It wasn't about superstition or mystery alone.